All right, and we do want to take you live now to Syria, where One America's Pearson Sharp is there on the ground. Pearson, what's the latest you've learned there?
So we want to announce that One American News has an exclusive discovery. We went to Duma today. We got exclusive access and we were brought into the town of Duma where the alleged chemical attack happened. We were brought in with a government escort and shown the areas where the chemical attack allegedly happened, and we got to speak with residents in the area, and we were even able to visit the hospital where the white helmets showed the video of the people being hosed down. So when I went into the town, we didn't really know what to expect, but we were brought to one of the neighborhoods close to where the attack happened. I spoke with a number of residents there, probably about 10 residents in that neighborhood. And this is, keep in mind, this is about a block and a half away from where the attack was supposedly happened. Not one of the people that I spoke to in that neighborhood said that they had seen anything or heard anything about a chemical attack on that day. They said that they were going about their normal business. Everything was pretty much business as usual in the neighborhood that day, and they didn't see or hear anything out of the ordinary. So we wanted to make sure that we covered all our bases, so we drove down a little further and we visited some rebel headquarters from Jaish al-Islam, the terror group that was holding the town until recently. And I got to go down and I explored some of the tunnels in the area. I walked through some rooms where they were making weapons, weapon manufacturing. There were entire rooms filled with mortars, and they were stacked from floor to ceiling. It was just, it's very shocking to see how much weaponry the terrorists had piled up in that area. After that, we went through the square where a convoy, I'm not sure who the convoy was from, but it looked like it was a Syrian relief convoy, and they had just lines of residents turning out, maybe 1,000 people long. It was a really long line, turning out for bread and supplies, water, food, clothing, things like that. And so we talked to a few people there, and I went up to random people. I know there's a lot of concern from people that the residents being interviewed are plants. They're Russian operatives, or they're staged interviews or things like that. And so we just randomly went up to different people. No one came up to us, and interviewed probably about 30 or 40 people throughout the town. And consistently, not one person in the entire town that we talked to said that they had seen or heard anything about a chemical attack. They said that they'd lived there for 15 years, 7 to 15 years, some of them, and so they're longtime residents of the area, and many of them were very close to the site that was allegedly attacked on the day that it was allegedly attacked. One man said that he was within 50 meters at the time they say it was attacked, and he heard and saw nothing out of the ordinary. When I asked them what they thought the chemical attack was, they told me, all of them told me, that it was staged by the rebels who were occupying the town at that time. They said that it was a fabrication, that it was a hoax, and when I asked them why, they told me that it was because the rebels were desperate and they needed a ploy to help get the Syrian army off their back so that they can escape. And so the residents told me, and again, I'm using that phrase a lot, the residents told me, because I want it to be clear that this is not an opinion, this is not propaganda, as some have accused, that this is simply facts that we found on the ground when we were in the town, things that we saw firsthand. So the residents told me that the terrorists staged this attack to get the Western powers to attack the Syrian army and get them off their backs so that they could escape. And that story was told to us by numerous people. So I asked them also what they thought about President Bashar al-Assad, because that's also a big question for a lot of people. I mean, you hear people like Boris Johnson and other leaders saying that President Bashar is terrorizing his people and that he's being very brutal to them. And again, this is just repeating facts that are out there in the media right now. And so when I talked to the people who lived in these towns, they specifically said that they loved Bashar al-Assad. They thought that he was great, and they said that I asked them how they felt about the moderate rebels that they were living under, and they said there's no such thing as moderate rebels. They said that the people that they were living under were starving them to death. One man said that he'd been there for the last 7 years and was being starved to death. His family was starving because the rebels wouldn't give them any food. They said they hoarded the medicine and took everything for themselves. And he said if anybody complained, you were risking your life. They'd kill you. They'd kill you and your family for complaining or raising any problems. He said that he was very grateful that President Assad had liberated the town and that they were completely in support of Assad. After that, we went to Ground Zero, where the attack allegedly happened. It's a big open square with a large monument in the very middle. It's probably about 100 meters in a circle. And it's not clear exactly where the strike happened in that square, but it was that square that the terrorists claimed was hit by the chemicals. And so I walked around it, I looked at everything. There were some mortars that had exploded in the concrete, but nothing looked like a chemical attack. And when I asked the people there were soldiers there, there were military police there. They said they'd been stationed there for a while and they hadn't seen anything that day. They did point out to me that there was a hospital nearby, which is right off the square actually, that had a basement. It was like 2 or 3 stories underground, where there was an emergency field hospital that had been used by the terrorists to treat their wounded. And so we looked around, and one of the buildings in that area, there was several, they're all about 15 stories. One of the buildings in the area had a large bulwark of dirt built up around the edges to apparently protect it from strikes so that people inside wouldn't be hurt. And we walked around, and there was a tunnel carved into the side of that, and you could walk down into it, and that was where they'd built this makeshift hospital. And it was actually very sophisticated. They had a car park, a garage, they had maintenance bays, things like that. And we walked down several floors underground and into the room, the hospital room that you see in all of the videos where the people are being hosed off. And it's still being used right now as a hospital. There's still doctors there taking care of people, but now those doctors are working for the government instead of working for Jaish al-Islam, the terrorists. And so I spoke to one of the doctors. He was a doctor in training right now, and he was on staff, on duty at the time of the attack that day. And I asked him what he saw that day, and he told me that it was a routine day for him. He said it was very dusty that day, and so a lot of people were coming in coughing, just, irritation, throat, and things like that. And normal war injuries, because it was part of a war zone occupied by the terrorists. And they said that there was nothing out of the ordinary, and while they were going about their rounds, suddenly, out of nowhere, they said a bunch of strangers burst into the room screaming that there was a chemical attack. And they started hosing, they brought in allegedly victims, and they started hosing them down with water. And so the doctors, they freaked out, and they grabbed hoses, and they started helping and stuff. And the strangers who brought in the victims were videotaping everything. This is all gathered from translations, so I may have missed something. I'm not trying to say this is exactly what happened, but this is what I gathered from what the doctor told me, speaking Arabic through my translator. And they said that they brought in cameras and they were filming everything, and as soon as they had, washed everybody off and stuff, they packed up and they left. And that was the end of it. And the doctors said when the people were there, they didn't see any indication that there was a chemical attack. They said the people's eyes, when you get burned by chemicals, your eyes swell up, they're puffy, you can't breathe, you're coughing. They said the people that came in looked totally normal. And so they didn't see any evidence of a chemical attack. I also talked to the head surgeon of the whole hospital, and he confirmed that. He said that day there were 0 deaths in the hospital. He said he had personally seen no evidence of a chemical attack. He also said that the weapons inspectors, there's 2 conflicting sides to this story. The first doctor said that what he thought were weapons inspectors came in, they toured the hospital, they just walked around and they left. And he said they didn't take any samples, they didn't test the walls or the hospital beds for any chemicals or anything like that. He said they just walked around, looked at stuff, and left. The head surgeon said that no inspectors had come whatsoever. So I'm not sure which one of those is true, but either way, the inspectors haven't revealed anything that they found, so it could be somewhere in between. In any case, no evidence has been found so far that there was any chemical attack. That's the bottom line from this story. That's not to say that there wasn't one. I don't have definitive proof either way, but going there and looking for any evidence, the dozens of people living there I interviewed, the soldiers working there, the military police, the government officials, the residents, the doctors in the hospitals, no one saw a single shred of evidence of any chemical attack. And I think that's the main point to take away from this. We're going to keep investigating it and keep looking into it, but for right now, that's where the investigation